I'm Amy Dolan, and this is the Feeding People podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Feeding People. Hey, who's that guy? Where's Amy Dolan? I'm Kelly Dolan. I'm the producer of the Feeding People podcast. And I'm also the spouse of this show's host, Amy Dolan, who you'll get to hear from in just a moment. And I asked Amy if I could jump on to the intro this week just to say a quick hello to everybody and mainly to just say thanks. Thank you for all of you who listen to this show week in and week out, and for all of the many ways that you've supported us over the past year. Thank you. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. If you enjoy the show and you want to keep up with future episodes, please hit that subscribe button right there on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to go back and listen to any previous episodes, you can find them all along with show notes for this episode at our website, feedingpeoplepodcast.com. All right. Today's guest is Rabbi Lizzi Heydemann. She's the founding rabbi of Mishkan Chicago, which is a just ridiculously cool spiritual community here in the city of Chicago that's reclaiming Judaism's inspiration and transformative essence, and who is seeking to create space for people who've felt on the fringes of the Jewish community. Recently, Rabbi Lizzi graciously invited Amy and me and Amy's mom to join her at Mishkan for this conversation, in which she shares her journey from growing up on the south side of Chicago to her decision to start Mishkan, and also about the role that food and sitting around the table with others who might be very different from each other plays in the life of their community as well as all of our lives. I truly loved getting to hear this conversation firsthand, as Amy and Rabbi Lizzi covered so much ground. And our hope is that whatever faith background you might be from, or no faith at all, you'll gain something incredible from Rabbi Lizzi, just like we did as we spent time with her. So with that, here it is, Amy's conversation with Rabbi Lizzi Heydemann.
Hello, Rabbi Lizzi. How are you today?
Great, Amy. Thanks for coming over here.
Absolutely. It's so good to be with you in your space here at Mishkan. How long have you been in this space?
In this space, almost 2 years.
2 years. Wow. And how old is this congregation?
9 years.
9 years.
Almost 9 years.
When's your anniversary?
September 2011 is when we started. So I guess
question.
Our first service was on September 11th, 2011. So it'll be 9 years next September.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Lucky number 9.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sure.
It's really great to be with you here today. My Jewish mother is here, which is so lovely.
Fun.
I'm part Jewish, part Christian. And I heard you speak last year at the Obama Summit, was just really moved by what you had to say. And so I'm just thankful for this opportunity to sit with you and talk more.
Thank you.
So how would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I would say I'm Lizzi Heydemann. I'm a rabbi at Mishkan. We have 3 of us. I'm the founding rabbi. I started this thing with a group of people who wanted to find spirituality and inspiration in Judaism. And that group of people spanned, spectrum of age ranges, from people who were young adults to people who already their kids had left the house and they were in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And the community of Mishkan that is, I guess, 8 years old, 8 years and change, was originally designed. And the people who we were thinking about including were precisely and specifically the people who haven't found homes in the traditional Jewish spaces. So the kind of rabbi I am is the kind of rabbi who is always looking for the person in the room who doesn't really seem like they know exactly what's going on, and thinking about how we create Jewish experiences that bring connection, accessibility to people who haven't felt it for all kinds of different reasons. They were young adults, they were LGBTQ, they were in interfaith relationships, they were spiritual seekers, and for all different kinds of reasons, Judaism hasn't worked for people. So the kind of rabbi I am is the kind of person who's looking for those people who haven't been satisfied or who maybe gave up on it in the first place and to give people a reason to find inspiration and nourishment from Jewish tradition.
I love that. That's so beautiful. I hope in my Christian tradition, I hope to do the same things. I really resonate with what you said. That's beautiful. Did you always know you wanted to be a rabbi?
No, but I knew earlier than a lot of people know what they want to do with their lives. I didn't know I wanted to be a particular thing at all.
Yeah.
But I did know that I was interested in God. And what that translated to as a kid was that I actually really liked Sunday school. I liked going to synagogue. I enjoyed the process of becoming a bat mitzvah, like the learning, the studying, the learning how to read Torah, the chanting of Torah. I enjoyed all of it. I stuck around, after my bat mitzvah to become, confirmed. And I liked that too. I liked talking about issues with the rabbi, whatever. I was like a geeky kid who enjoyed that stuff. And then after high school, after I graduated from high school, I took a year off and went to Israel to study for a year, which in the Orthodox world is very commonplace. It's like more often than not, people will take a year off before going to college to go study in Israel for a year. I would say in the liberal denominations, Reform, Reconstructionist, Conservative, it's much less common. And my parents were very opposed. They thought it was a horrible idea.
Wow.
They were worried I wouldn't come home. They
Wow.
were worried I would, become so religious I wouldn't eat in their house.
Wow.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
That, go become so religious that, the kashrut, the keeping kosher that your parents do or don't do becomes a reason why you might not even eat off their plates.
Wow.
And my mom was very concerned that would happen. On reflecting back, I think to myself, Mom, I barely ate off your plates to begin with because we had dinner so infrequently together, which I say with love, of course. But,
of course.
And once I came back from that year abroad, I went to Stanford University as an undergrad, and the advice I was given was not to pick a major, but to just look through the program booklet and look at the classes I wanted to take, which seems very sensible, but just look at the classes that I felt drawn to.
Wow.
And then pick a major based on the classes that I felt drawn to. And they were all in the philosophy, religious studies, and psychology departments. And the combination of my own sort of personal interest in Judaism and a sort of academic interest in religion, philosophy, morality, psychology, how we make sense of the world, how we behave in the world, how we take care of each other, the things that we do that are rational, that are totally irrational, all that stuff. By halfway through my freshman year of college, I knew I was going to be a rabbi.
And then it was just sealed from there.
I really wanted to have, God or circumstance change my fate, honestly, because I think it would have been a lot more fun to have arrived at it after having had a career doing something else. I was in school with people who had been actors, who had been lawyers, who had, been in insurance sales, like people who came to it as a second or third career, at a later point in their life. They had more wisdom, they had stories, they had, something to compare Judaism to. The person who had come after being a barrister in England, she was constantly comparing the Talmud to legal theory, like English legal theory. And so I always sort of felt like I missed out on the experience of having, another life to bring into my Jewish story.
Yeah.
But instead, what I found is that I just, I bring other things into my Jewish story.
That's right.
I ended up being very interested in integrative medicine. So once I sort of had it in my head, I'm going to be a rabbi.
Yeah.
So then I actually sort of laid off the religious studies classes and started taking things that I knew I would not be able to spend as much time on once I was out of undergrad. And so I took classes on the psychology of forgiveness and guilt, sort of cross-disciplinary classes. Yeah. I, spent a bunch of time learning about Chinese medicine and healing touch, and I learned Reiki.
Wow.
And, I was like a hospital chaplain. And so being able to bring all of that into teaching and preaching and being a Jewish, a Jewish pastoral presence, that's been really helpful.
Right.
Sort of did it the other way.
Yeah. So you mentioned your mom and meals growing up. Can you say more about that? What was food like in your home as you were growing up? Did you have meals together? Did you cook? Was food part of special moments during the week? What was it like?
So if anybody listening to this can hear me smiling, so I'm smiling mostly because that's not really a way that I would characterize my upbringing. However, if I think about it, we did sit around a very small table. We had a very small kitchen table that was sort of like stuck into the corner of a very...
In Chicago?
Yeah, small, narrow kitchen in my home. And so there were only two sides to the table. So only two people could sit at the table.
Wow.
And it would usually be my dad and me, and then you would like, if anybody else wanted to sit at the table, they would like pull a stool up or pull a chair up so that it would be like two people at the table and then somebody right behind on either side. And I feel like eating cereal in the morning was kind of the most consistent meal experience, and probably where, the best conversations and most consistent like parent-child time happened before we went off to school and before they went off to work. Because at night, we did eat dinner together on occasion, maybe twice a week. We had a babysitter who would make food for us, and it was usually some kind of noodle, spaghetti, macaroni and cheese, and some kind of meat, hot dogs, ground beef, chicken. And I would not say that, group family dinners left a major impression, whether for like during the week or on Shabbat. A lot of Jewish kids will, say we didn't eat together during the week, but we did on Shabbat, like we always had Shabbat dinner. And that's not true it's not my story.
Yeah.
My parents they both worked downtown, and sometimes they got home, early enough for us to all eat together. And very often they didn't. And so I wouldn't say like family dinner was like a major feature, of positive memory building for me. We built memories in many other ways. But sitting around the breakfast table, actually kind of crowding around the breakfast table, my sister and my parents, on a good morning, like eating Cheerios, or, we were always sort of testing out new cereals. I feel like that was kind of our thing. Yeah.
That's a nice memory. A nice breakfast cereal memory.
Very, Kellogg's could use us in an ad campaign.
So given the way that you grew up with your family and squished together at the table for meals, how did that influence your own gathering around tables and connecting food to faith for yourself as you got older, as you became a rabbi, as you have your own family now? Like, how did that all come together, if it did?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I started getting involved with two different organizations that I think showed me like the power of the table to create an experience, to create like a meaningful spiritual experience. So one of those organizations was the Kosher Co-op at Stanford. And it was the only kosher dining room at Stanford. And it was a co-op, meaning it was like by the students for the students. It was not run by the dining services. It was run by students who needed kosher food, which at that time was like 5 college students, or a couple grad students, and then maybe another 10 or so who didn't themselves like need to only eat kosher food, but just sort of felt like, man, we want to be in solidarity with our Jewish brothers, sisters, friends. And it's like not cool that, Danny or Jonathan can't eat food unless they themselves cook it every single day. Whereas like everybody else on campus, has a whole fancy dining service, that makes like this, ridiculous, resplendent meal for morning, lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. Yeah. So the Kennedy Kosher Co-op was a group of students who cooked for each other. And there was a schedule, and everybody was on the schedule for different meals. And Shabbat, there would be a couple people who were responsible for both cooking and then setting up the dining hall. And after services every Friday night, that's where everybody would walk to. And then everybody would walk from the Hillel building, which was about a mile away, to the Kosher Co-op. And it almost felt like a pilgrimage every single week, because you were walking at night from one place where you had services around a lake that was sometimes full and sometimes empty, down this lake path to the co-op. And, you'd come into this light-filled space that somebody set up with, tablecloths and flowers that somebody picked from, around the lake, and have a prepared, shared, beautiful meal that was sometimes delicious, and sometimes it tasted like college students who didn't know how to cooked it.
Yeah.
But it was always really meaningful. So that was one place where I sort of felt, by the people, for the people, mealtime magic. And then the other place in college was there was an Orthodox group of rabbis and rebbitzins. So, at the time, sort of by definition, they were black hat Orthodox rabbis. So those guys were men and their wives were women. And they would create these meals that they invited students to on Friday nights, that they just had like multiple courses, and they had all of their children, and they would have, it would be like 10 people, 20 people. It would just be like, it would feel like this huge dinner party every single week that was like deeply rooted in tradition, So it wasn't just like saying a blessing over wine and saying a blessing over bread and then eating and talking about sports. They sort of created a conversation at the table that felt elevated, So the rabbi would turn to his 6-year-old daughter and say like, Ruchi, what's in this week's parsha? What's the name of the parsha? What's the section of the Torah that we read? And she would say, oh, it's Chaye Sarah. It's, this week we read about the life of Sarah. Okay, what happens in the parsha? The 6-year-old would, tell everybody what she learned in school this week.
Just over the meal.
And and, there's probably an element of, showing off or whatever, but there was also, this like the beauty of sharing a collective story, and a lot of the students, myself included, often would not know the answers to the questions he was asking his 6-year-old daughter.
Sure.
So what does the Torah say about that? Okay. What do the commentaries say about the Torah on that? And I just remember being so moved and impressed by, like the commitment it takes to host like this every single week.
Right.
And to enjoy like this every single week. There's just like a slowness about it. On Friday night, once you're at dinner, there's not like another destination after that. There's nowhere to go. There's like, you are here. And so the sort of just deep presence that's possible when you're not like taking out your phone and checking. This was also before smartphones. So that wasn't even a thing you could have done back in like 2005. But you've got nowhere to go. You're here. And that's sort of the ethos on Shabbat in general, is like, you are here, and so eating and the table becomes part of like sort of a radical presence that you really, it's like a gift that you give yourself and the people around you. So I would say those are the places, in my own sort of religious spiritual formation that I saw and felt the power of, the table as a spiritual experience.
Yes, that's so beautiful and lovely. And I, of course, resonate so deeply. I feel like there's just such magic around the table, the things you're talking about, the way we can connect, the way we can learn from each other. And it's not always a safe place, of course, but like it, to me, provides the greatest opportunity to engage because we're sitting eye to eye. We're at least somewhat equal in this moment at the table. And I think like the magic of that, being able to gather with people of all ages, to have good conversation around food there's nothing else like it to me. And so it's really cool that you had those experiences in college that obviously led you to where you are today and the way you gather. And did you think that you would start your own place like this?
At that time, no.
Yeah.
No, that never would have occurred to me. And, in college, it's sort of a time of soul searching and intellectual and spiritual formation. It's the sort of joke is, right, that what is college? It's a bunch of students sitting up at 2 a.m. in the dorm on the floor talking about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin or like other ridiculous academic.
I went to Bible college, so it was like systematic theology at 3 a.m. And I was like, can we just like get a coffee or something? Like, why are we talking like this?
So I think that, right. In college, you're just... trying to figure yourself out. And so for me, becoming a rabbi was kind of what I figured out once I figured out that, like I was considering many different paths. I grew up in the Reform movement, but I didn't feel a particular sense of allegiance to the Reform movement. These folks that I was having dinner with, regularly were Orthodox. I didn't feel that I could fully be myself, the way that I sang, the way that I led services, that was going to be possible in that context, even though there was much about it that was really compelling intellectually and in terms of the rigor of study and community. Many of the people who gathered around the tables at Hillel after dinner were out of the conservative movement. They had all gone to like Camp Ramah or other conservative movement camps. And what it seemed to me was they got sort of the education of tradition. They knew the blessing after meals that takes 10 minutes to say, that's like paragraph upon paragraph upon paragraph in Hebrew with all these funky tunes. Like they knew all of that insider stuff at the same time as they were like egalitarian and feminist and sort of socially progressive. And I ended up going that route personally. And so I was ordained in the conservative movement, but I couldn't have foreseen helping found a spiritual community in Chicago at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was what I needed. Yeah. I didn't know it was what Chicago needed. How did it happen? So I went to Los Angeles after being in the Bay Area for 6 years. And my thought was the Bay Area was my home. That was where my people were. That was where I sort of felt like, I don't know, I breathe the air in and just feel like I was at home. And when I would come actually home to Chicago, on different vacations, winter vacation, visit my parents on the way to or from somewhere, I wasn't yet connected to Chicago as an adult. It was sort of like a pass-through place where my parents lived. So at that time, I didn't expect coming home here. While I was in Los Angeles, I became part of a community called IKAR, I-K-A-R, which means the essence. And it was also a new community, also post-denominational, sort of not one of the movements. It wasn't conservative, it wasn't Reform, it wasn't Orthodox. It was founded by a conservative rabbi and truthfully was quite traditional in its way of leading prayers, but also socially very progressive and politically sort of social justice oriented. And there were a ton of young people there, and services felt alive and meaningful. And I loved being part of the community as a congregant. And then I became part of the community as a prayer leader. They had a little circle of people who would sit in the middle of the congregation and sing. And it wasn't quite a choir so much as like a little team called the davening team. Davening is Yiddish for prayer. And I started singing with them. And then when I got ordained, IKAR was where I ended up working as my first job out of school. And I was doing community organizing with them, with a group there called PICO, that did faith-based community organizing for churches and synagogues. And I just couldn't help but thinking that this method of, individual conversation, one-to-one based community organizing to sort of learn about what people's sense of self-interest was, and then building collective power around people's individual, what they think is their atomized, oh, no, other people don't care about this. This is just the thing that keeps me up at night. But as it turns out, it's you and like everybody else on your block, or it's you and everybody else in your city or whatever. And that like, if there's somebody who can kind of convene all of those individuals and, get them all in a room and say, you know what, I heard from all of you, you all said you care about this thing. And yet like, we haven't done anything about it because we didn't know that there was this collective here, but there is. And I just thought, that's how social change happens. Yeah. That's how community organizing works. But I just thought like somebody should be doing this for Jews. Like every Jew I talk to is dissatisfied and unhappy or, has given up on the possibility that Judaism is a spiritual practice, is a path, toward God, meaning, inspiration. Most Jews orient toward the religion as a tradition, happens in the home with family. And if you're lucky, you've got, good food that you eat, at Passover and Shabbat and the holidays. But nobody talks about synagogue like it's their spiritual, recharge.
Wow.
People don't talk. Yeah. I don't know if this is news to you, but like people don't tend, at best, people would refer to synagogues as like positive community building. Like that's where my community is. But as a person who, as I said before, I was like oriented toward like God and inspiration and song and harmony and, and like that being my way in, it was like it was not going to work for me to not have synagogue also be a place where I found inspiration and meaning and truth and community and, all the other things. So being from Chicago, something clicked for me when I was 29, like sitting in LA in the job that I really enjoyed with the friends and community that I very much enjoyed. Something changed and I suddenly felt the need to come home. And my parents did not understand. They were like, what's the matter with you? You've got a great job and you got great friends and you're at this awesome community and you're at IKAR. And that's like, IKAR and Rabbi Sharon Brous. These are like names in the Jewish world. And like, wow, you're at this amazing place. Why would you leave? Yeah. And there's nothing like this in Chicago. Why would you, and I was like, I think maybe because I'm supposed to start the thing in Chicago. And so that's sort of, I came to Chicago in 2011 with the sense that maybe I could be part of creating something like IKAR here. And it wouldn't be IKAR. It would be based, it would be local, organic, grassroots, Chicago-based Judaism. It would be inspired, down to earth, like Midwestern Judaism. Grown from the people that I got to know here. And I didn't know who those people would be. And I didn't know where it would be. And I started working actually part-time at a congregation in the suburbs called Eitz Chaim, where they were very happy to know that like on Saturday morning I was hanging out with them, but on Friday night I was doing stuff here in the city. And that's sort of how it came together in 2011 was, being in Chicago, being planted in the city, but, having a stable community in the suburbs that was very supportive, of me kind of exploring this other thing. And then working with people here in the city to birth a Jewish space that would feel life-giving and inspired.
Wow. It's such a beautiful story. So beautiful.
Sorry, I feel like I just talked for a really long time.
Kind of the best podcasts are the ones where we're talking a lot. So that's great.
Really? Are you sure? I feel like the best podcasts are the ones where the person answering the question answers the question like in 3 pithy, good, short sentences.
No.
Sorry.
No, actually the problem I have now is like there's like 3 different avenues I want to take this based on what you said. So I'm going to focus myself. I've been thinking a lot about for myself lately. It's so interesting that you're a community organizer. I've been thinking so much about myself lately in my Sunday Supper church. And I've just been thinking about the role of food connected to movements and community organizing. And I feel like that's something that I've never been a community organizer or anything like that, but I'm really paying attention to where I see food connected to organization and the crucial role that food plays, right? Like, my friend says you can't just like go out and protest and you can't just like make your signs one day and protest. Like that's a whole organized thing that happens. Someone needed to feed everyone and someone needed to watch the kids and someone needed to take off work and pay for the bus and make the signs and get downtown. And so I've been like thinking about all of that. And I've been thinking about how like the organized thing I have is my dinner church and how I can increasingly be feeding my people so that we're organized and we're able to speak for what we need to speak about and we're able to fight and we're able to create beauty and all of the things, but that food is the thing that really like feeds us and nourishes us in order to have the strength to do those things. So I just love that you said that. Do you find that to be true for your group here, that food nourishes you to be able to do the things you need to do?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. There's a concept that many synagogues sort of lovingly throw around, which is JFK, which means just for Kiddush. Like the people who show up, JFK, the people who show up at services at noon on Saturday and literally miss the service but are there for the bagels.
Oh, yes.
And it's considered in most places entirely legitimate. Like it's totally okay. You can be a JFK Jew.
Yes.
Because I think there's a sense of recognition that for many people, the nourishment and community is like over lunch. It's over Kiddush.
Yes.
And I think we have some of that in our community. I think maybe the spin that Mishkan is bringing to Judaism and food, like most people would say exactly what you just said, that, you know, food is this sort of like, and it's not just the food, obviously.
No.
Like when we're talking about food, you sort of mean the experience of gathering to eat together, and that is
the human and sacred connection that happens when we're eating the same food. Right?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. You know, so I think nobody would dispute that. The question is, I think for us, the unique maybe twist that we're putting on it is, how do we infuse that with even greater awareness of the larger context of tradition that this food is being consumed in?
Yes.
You know, and so when we all have this tradition of, we at Mishkan have this tradition of all putting our hands in the center, like we pray in a big, like concentric circles, like not one big circle, but like concentric circles. And so at the end of a service, we'll, you know, break out the two loaves of bread, two challahs that are there, and the two challahs represent abundance. You know, that it's Shabbat, and that we have two chalot that represent abundance, and everybody puts a hand on the shoulder of the person in front of them and the shoulder of the person in front of them, all, you know, sort of reaching toward the bread. So it ends up being, you know, if you were looking at it from above, it would all look like we're sort of, you know, hand on hand, on shoulder on hand, and then, you know, all reaching in toward the challah at the center. And the idea is that we're embodying all of the hands that it took to create the sustenance that we're going to eat. You know, so like the bread, and then we go upstairs and there's this beautiful dinner. We work with a catering group called Diaspora Dinners, Rachel Ellison and Dylan Masick, that they cook for us and, you know, plenty of other people too. But it's like they cooked the dinner, but somebody else grew the carrots, and somebody else, you know, drove the truck from the, you know, the warehouse to the supermarket, and somebody else, you know, it's just like the number of people that it takes to actually make a meal is far greater than the number of people who actually physically made the meal.
Yes.
And so we try to bring awareness to that in this moment. We all put our hands in the center.
Yes.
And we do that every single time we eat.
I love that. And that we're all connected through food, right?
Yeah.
I think when we disconnect ourselves from too many of those people, and we just place our expectations on, well, you know, I want this food at this time and this meal, like, to me that takes away some of the sacredness of eating and enjoying food with each other. Right? Yeah. I love that. Do you have a photo of like that from the prayer from above?
Somebody
I feel like I can see that in my mind.
We should and make a great website photo. I don't know where. Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you about this. I love that you say, speaking of your website, I think this is like on your website. I love that you say this about Mishkan, that it's for people who have felt on the fringes of Jewish community, specifically queer Jews, people in interfaith relationships, spiritual seekers, Jews of color, Jews by choice. I love that. How would you encourage, so like when I was starting Sunday Supper Church and I said like, I just want like everyone at the table, right? Like Jesus will be our center, but like I just want everyone at the table. To me, that's the most beautiful spiritual sacred experience. And I remember someone telling me in the very beginning, like, good luck with that. Like,
good luck with that. It's too general.
They're just that's too hard. Like there's a reason people don't go to meals and dinners and have friends with people who are different than them, you know? And I was like, challenge accepted.
So it happened.
So we're going to do that. So how do you create like this space for all of these lovely people who have felt on the fringe, who maybe still feel on the fringe? Like, how do you create a space where they feel loved and welcome? And let's do that.
You know, some of it has to do with sort of counterintuitively naming difference.
Yes.
So like, you know, the part that you just read, many communities will just say on their website, we are warm and welcoming and friendly to everyone.
I hate that.
Actually, it's like what religious community would not be warm and welcoming and friendly to everybody?
And actually, okay, now we're here.
Okay.
I actually feel like that's actually, when I see that all are welcome, it actually like signals to me all are not welcome. That's actually what I feel, because it's too general.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, and it's sort of like, when Black Lives Matters
Yes.
came as a phrase, and it was sort of like nobody who was saying Black Lives Matters was saying Black Lives Matter more than any other life.
Right.
They were saying Black Lives Matter as much as any other life.
Right.
And in order to talk about something that, we maybe sweep under the rug or don't look at, we're going to, shine the light on a particular group. And, immediately people were like, well, but don't all lives matter? Sort of to your point.
Right.
And when you heard that, you sort of went, oh, okay, I sort of see where you stand on the issue.
Exactly. Yes.
And, I think probably all of the places that say all are welcome here mean well and think that they're genuinely
You're
welcoming.
a better person than me.
I don't know. I like try to give the benefit of the doubt here. But try to give the benefit of the doubt. But I think in the Jewish community, especially in 2011 when we were getting started, it was not a foregone conclusion that a rabbi who was ordained a conservative rabbi would be welcoming to interfaith couples.
Yes.
Would do an interfaith wedding.
Yes.
Which honestly in 2011 I wasn't sure if I would do either, because that was the movement that I came out of, and the Jewish community sort of was and is still very much figuring out its
Yes.
relationship to interdating, intermarried couples and families. Jews of color, queer Jews, I don't think the conservative movement yet, when Mishkan was starting, had, ordained a class of rabbis in which openly gay students had been part of the class. There were people who had been in the closet and had come out later,
Sure.
but it was still kind of a frontier. Young adults sort of historically don't feel comfortable in most synagogue. I don't know about churches. This is like I sort of know the Jewish community, but
Yeah.
I don't know. The other night I spoke at a gathering with a bunch of young adults, and they asked this question: how'd you start Mishkan? And I said, well, I had this problem, which was that I really wanted to go to shul because I'm one of those weirdos who like Judaism. I like practicing it. I like prayer. I want to go to services, and I would go to a synagogue, and I would be the youngest person in the room, not by a decade, but by 3 decades. And people would look at me like, oh, we're so glad you're here. You really make us feel like, like we feel younger because you're in the room. And that was great. But I also just felt like this is a major missed opportunity for my generation.
Yeah.
And there should be a place where people like me want to show up. So we labeled ourselves as being all these things, as you saw on the website. But I think talk is cheap. And if you're not also representing yourself in your leadership with the things that you say that you are, then you still got a distance to go.
And people know that. People know that.
Yeah.
People can see that right away.
So, we have a pretty diverse staff along the lines of the different kinds of things that, we're trying to say to people, like, we value you no matter who you are and where you come from. And people on our staff are intermarried and queer and politically diverse.
Wow.
I think that's a different thing. And there's always room to grow.
Yes.
There's always room to grow.
Yes. That's so true. Right. How do you come to a table with someone who's different than you with a posture of curiosity and openness? And of course, with the caveat, no one should ever show up to a table that's not safe, right?
Yeah.
Where their identity won't be valued the best it can, right?
Yeah.
But if a table is going to be safe for you to express yourself and to be seen, how do you do that? How do you show up somewhere with just a posture of curiosity and learning about someone else?
I think it sort of depends, obviously, on the context and the table. It sounds like Sunday Supper Church probably has a format and flow in which, you can communicate the ground rules or whatever it is that creates the sense of structure and safety in which people have conversations about meaningful things. One of the things we've been trying to do is get people familiar with common language for expressing both discomfort and curiosity.
That's great.
So after maybe 7 years of building this diverse community, which every year was becoming more diverse, it sort of started off with a lot of young adults and became young adults and young families and Generation X and baby boomers. And so there's a lot of diversity in any given room. There are many people who really appreciate that on every single name tag, if we print it for you or if we offer you the opportunity to write in your own name, we have the option to write your pronouns. Many people will write pronouns because they know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Many people will not because they don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I would say probably a minority of those people, are sort of on the boat of like, why should I have to announce my pronouns if, isn't it obvious what I am? But then to be able to have among our builders, so among our members, like people who join Mishkan, who want to be part of this community. So having conversations in which we build common vocabulary about the diversity in the room and about how to encounter it. So when you sit with somebody who's different from you, maybe they're different from you, in terms of their gender expression. Maybe they're different from you in terms of their Jewish observance. They're wearing a kippah or they're wearing tzitzit, or they don't drive on Shabbat, or they do drive on Shabbat. They're all, there's a spectrum of Jewish ritual observance, and we are a non-denominational community in which, we kind of have the spectrum of people and versions of practice. And so to tell people it's actually okay to ask, can I ask you about this?
Yeah.
So now the person has the option of saying, I actually would prefer not to talk about it.
Right.
Or, sure, what do you want to know?
That's good. That's good. I'm gonna do a series pretty soon at Sunday Supper Church called Table Manners.
Table manners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like before you ask the question you're unsure about, ask a first question.
Yeah.
Can I ask you this?
Right. And, on this form we have, or, it's like community norms, building a culture of empowerment, respect, and positivity. That's the document we have everybody sort of look at, read together, chew on, ask questions about. There are a bunch of different suggestions for, if you feel uncomfortable, sort of try giving the person you're speaking to the benefit of the doubt. They might be of a different generation than you. They might have been socialized differently. They might not know. Chances are, whatever it is that they offended you with just now, they don't even realize they just said something inappropriate.
Yes.
So now your options are, here's some ways you might use your words to communicate your discomfort. To say, that struck me as insensitive, or I feel uncomfortable, or,
Yes.
and trying to do that without judgment of the person, like this person is stupid or this person is bad.
Right.
But, even though obviously none of us wants to become sort of the token educator for all people like us, sometimes, in community, especially if you're investing in this community, your emotional, and spiritual life. So then there's going to probably be some sharing of who you are. That's going to be an educational moment for somebody else.
Yes.
And you're helping them become a more aware, hopefully moral person, just by encountering you. And hopefully you're going to have a moment where you learn something too that you didn't realize or know about. And hopefully that's going on across many vectors, all in the same community all at once. It's hard though.
It's really hard.
It's hard, we've had people say, you made me very uncomfortable. What did I do? You gave me a hug and you didn't ask me. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I needed to ask. Okay, now we know, in a diverse community in which you're not sure how people want to be touched, you can say, can I give you a hug?
Right.
And somebody has the right to say, I'd prefer not. We're like, sure, get in here.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, I'm going to need all these notes for
I'll tell you what we did was we started this document with our staff.
Amazing.
We started the doc with our staff.
Yeah.
And we built, sort of like rules of the road sort of thing. For what we thought would be useful and helpful. And then we circulated it to our board and said, what do you think we should be adding here or taking away or saying differently? And then we shared it with our community of builders and said, do you have any feedback for us? And so it's been kind of a document in progress that I hope, reflects the experience of all these people who have totally, this isn't the first place where this stuff is coming up. But obviously, we want to be a place where it can come up and still feel safe.
Yes, I love that. It's really, really beautiful what you're creating here, what you've already created, and what you're creating right now. I can feel the love and the intentionality and the beauty in providing a space for all to be welcome.
What, have you learned anything along the way that you feel like you would want to, there are going to be Mishkan people listening to this who don't know anything about Sunday Supper Club. What would you want, your average Mishkan listener to learn about your church and space and what you feel like you have to teach Teach us.
I mean, people don't normally ask me questions. I love this.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, it just that, to gather around a table, I think at Sunday Supper Church is a very like church spiritual experience. And often I hear people talking about how they wish for more for their lives, right? They feel religious. They feel like they want more connection with people. They want more relationships. And to me, I said, then like show up, right? Just show up. But that's the hardest part. The showing up is the hardest part. It's easier to stay home and stay comfortable, especially in the winters and all that. So I would love for people who are looking for a community, a dinner church community. We're centered on Jesus, but all are welcome. We're going to reclaim it now, right? We have Jewish women who come. We have queer people. We have people of color. And to me, just like that's everything. Like I have never felt closer to God. I've never felt closer to people. It's the way to go. And I think if you're interested in a community like that, if you connect already over dinner and tables and food and the spirituality behind that, like, of course, check us out. But there's opportunity for that all over. And I tell the people of Sunday Supper Church, like, to me, every table is sacred. And so what we do on Sunday nights is one sacred gathering, one sacred table, right? But like when Kelly and I eat dinner together in our home on a random Tuesday night, like that's probably one of the most sacred tables in my life, you know? So like if you're coming to a gathering on Sunday night, great, like experience that and show up for that, but also like go to coffee with someone or cook for someone and see if you can have a human sacred connection around any table. Because I really believe that.
How many people eat dinner together at church?
Oh, I like this podcast. It's turning around. I feel unprepared. We have about 30 adults and 10 kids. And it's just, when you were talking before about like creating something even for yourself, that's how I feel. Yeah. I feel like this, if I weren't the pastor and the founder, like this is the church I hope would exist in the world that I could go to. And, early on, one of my pastor friends said, he worked at another church, and he said, do you know how lucky you are to be pastoring the church you would go to?
That's right.
Right? Because not many people feel that way. Yeah. And that's how I feel. It's just, it's hard. It's really, really hard also. And it brings out all of my insecurities that are like, I think are taken care of, but really aren't. And it's really hard, but it is worth it. Yeah, it's worth it, right? Yeah. Okay. Enough questions from you.
All right. I'll stop. Okay.
All right. Let's finish up with this is going to be the most spiritual question actually that I ask. What is the best restaurant in Chicago in your opinion?
Oh God. I mean, first of all, Amy, when I eat food, people make fun of me. My friends make fun of me because it's not. If you weren't sure that I was eating food, you might think I was doing something else.
Really?
That brings somebody a lot of pleasure, just in not in public. I really enjoy food, and so I will be as happy eating at a diner as I will be eating at a fancy restaurant. Maybe more happy because there's probably going to be like more food on my plate. We live in North Center here. Spaccanapoli has really good pizza.
Oh, Kelly's nodding from behind you.
There's a restaurant called Gather in Lincoln Square on Lincoln that has really, really good appetizers, like vegetarian appetizers. I don't eat meat out of the house. And so any place that has like delicious, roasted Brussels sprouts or cauliflower.
It's a treasure.
But honestly, I am so happy when somebody else makes me food. I think this is the thing about the house in which I grew up, right? Is like I wasn't really taught how to cook. Yeah. So like I can bake a salmon. I can stick some asparagus in the oven, but I still really appreciate it and take it as a sign of, love and support when somebody else feeds me. Yeah. And so I will be happy to eat anywhere.
That's great. Perfect answer. People who love to eat are the best kinds of people, Julia Child said. Rabbi Lizzi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for what you're building and creating here in Chicago. It's really, really special. And keep going.
Thanks, Amy.